Howdy, of you delicious people. I'm here today to review Blade Trinity. There was supposed to be a Blade 4. Ryan Reynolds, through commentary of this film, because I caught some bits and pieces of the commentary of this movie, and Ryan Reynolds had stated that he was signed on to be part of Blade 4, but that fell through, so he was to be put into this film. So that probably tells me that maybe they were working simultaneously on two different Blade movies, and whoever had just gone on and decided to just kind of like smash those two films together to make one film really tells me like why this movie eventually was to have been the last of the Blade franchise. So I never thought I was gonna go on and talk about this film. But like it seems that people were interested enough in me talking about it in the community. So thank you guys for wanting to go on and have me talk about this movie regardless of how I am to ultimately feel about it. So there is a lot of controversy more than anything else to have been said about this movie. We have Patton Oswalt that is to state that Wesley Snipes was such a method actor that he would go on and write notes to the director and sign them Blade and want to just be called Blade. And supposedly there was allegedly so many things that people said about certain people fighting certain people in this movie, but that all is to probably just be allegations and nothing that I can think I can prove. But here's the goofy thing. The director himself would go on and talk about Blade Trinity in commentary and say that he loved the experience in this film, but then in an interview he would turn around and say that this was the most depressed he's ever been in a movie. So, which is it? It's kind of a hypocrite to just kind of turn around and just be like, well, like maybe he loved it one day, but then like hated it another. I don't know. Maybe like there was some times where like after a certain more thought about a movie and seeing it once, like you really did love it, and then after the fifth or sixth time, you're just like, oh, I'm getting tired of it. Like maybe that's just that director that after so many times of talking about that film, because always someone is going to go on and ask about it. Yeah, for him, like that's probably become that. But anyways, uh I would just be just kind of interested to find anything about like how this whole movie was broke down from an actual legitimate source about it, rather than just going and trying to find any real just bizarrish random things that people could probably come up with to talk about this movie. Uh, because I want to know the real truth about it. So let me go on and let's have me just kind of break down about this film. So, firstly, the picture that I chose in here was when Drake was going on and going into the vampire merchandise store and having the goth vixen girl go on and talk about all the products. And like, what does this scene do to the actual story of this movie? Nothing. And so really there was a lot of stuff about this film that honestly like takes a step backwards rather than expanding upon what they had already done from second film to add more into the third movie. And even to the point of us like having me want to write this off as it feeling so much like Batman 66. It's just like I want to have at some points where people are delivering punches and kicks and having the blam, flim, flirm, because really, like, this movie doesn't feel written for a film, it feels written for a Blade show. This movie is so freaking slowed down that by the time that it actually does pick up, then I'm like, we've gone too far now. Like, this movie has gone so freaking slow. No matter what action you can deliver me, which won't be the most awe-inspiring action, because even in the fights, like, they figured out a way to just kind of slow down or just have, like, Blade or whoever just start to mostly run through whoever the villains are, with the exclusion of Hannibal King having a problem facing off against Jarko in this movie, who is Paul Levesque, Triple H from WWE. Uh, which I'm like, man, like, this is to probably be my favorite Triple H movie, but again, it's just like, looking at this movie, like, a lot of the stuff that goes on within it just feels so childish. It feels like somebody had finally gone on to discover curse words for the first time, and they're just smothering it with F words and D words and this and that. And it's just like, ooh, how many times can I say the F word in a film? Man, uh, like, I guess you just had nothing else to say but F this and F this movie and F off. What, like, to the point of even, like, Blade needing to take the time to make fun of people for, like, having the word, like, F off or F you or whatever just kind of displayed on their chests, and uh and questioning, like, the quality of the team that he's involved in. But it's not like it's going to go on and drastically change from when Blade is going to be incorporated in this Dakota Ring team. Besides, logically, him just being on a team that he really doesn't need to be in. He's facing off against faceless goons and human familiars. What does he need a team for? Why is there no, like, escalation from the second film to make it harder for Blade to be able to do what he needs to do in this film? It seems rather a breeze, because even when we have Drake in this film, Drake is really doing not much of anything to, like, expand his horizons or uh be a Drake that is much more like an up-to-date man as far as skill is involved. Like, it feels like when Dracula is going to go on and face off against Blade, like, Dracula has been away for a very long time, and Blade is to be the most cutting edge of martial arts skill, and Drake is just to be a boxer fighting against an MMA fighter, and Drake cannot go on and use his legs to kick uh, Blade because they aren't strong enough, because he's only built up his arms. So, as well as also just Drake being a very old-fashioned guy. So, like, just making him on a laundry list of, like, well, yeah, I've had so many others, like, have that same claim, but they've ended up at the same end of my sword. So, if anything, they could have actually gone on to experiment a lot more with vampires in this movie to make this movie a lot more interesting. They could have honestly have perfected, like, having daywalker vampires, and logically we could have had the daywalker vampires just treating the normal vampires like dirt or like a lesser thing. And so then the vampires could have gone on and brought in, like, Drake to like keep like the order of things, and like we really had something cooking here. We could have had Blade need an existence of a team because he's facing off against a team of foes that are to be his equal, so he needs to have other skilled like beings for him to go on and logically face off against. Because all he did have was Whistler, and Whistler ends up getting taken down by, again, human beings within this film. So, this movie is bad. This movie is bad, surprisingly. But if anything, like, I understand there being easy reasons for why there is such a problem writing a new Blade movie, because what can they do? What logically can they do? Like, what can they really pull from that isn't Blade fighting more vampire characters? And so, with that said, like, that's the real problem with Blade, is basically just realizing that they're probably just going to copy and paste from prior Blade things and write it off as new, like a number of projects have already kind of done the same. And just kind of give us a very bland, a very just vanilla Blade movie at some point in the future. So, with that said, I think it's about that time to just break down this film and to kind of tee it up. So, Blade ends up going on to be public enemy number one for the human race. Let's just kind of forget that the vampires even exist, because the vampires are just so weak and defenseless at this point that they need to go on and find the one vampire that they have to just dig up to be able to have some kind of leg to stand on against Blade. Because they got jack crap nothing. So, because they couldn't have gone on and experimented and come up with a better vampire. Oh, no, you can't do that. So, or even go and find other people that aren't vampires that are mortals or Frankensteins or werewolves or something, to just like throw a wrench in Blade's like consistently having just silver weaponry that it's like, oh my god, now I'm facing off against a foe that like doesn't have any effect on like a UV arc or this or that. What am I gonna do? Get better writers? Oh yeah, that makes sense. So we would have Blade that faces off against these vampirish foes, that one of them is to be an imposter and is actually a human, which then forces Blade to then go back to his hideout and wait for somebody to try and find Whistler to have the police come and find Blade. So Blade then goes on and gets arrested, to come to find that there is some therapist that seems to have some knowledge on vampires and is breaking it down, so much so that he is to have taken a TV spot where him and the chief are going on and talking about Blade and vampires and just weird, goofy uh, sexual sadism or whatever goofy things that Vance talks about in this movie. Let me talk about your relationship with your mother. Okay, all right. What a nice little joke there. So Blade gets arrested by the human race, to then come to find that even the top people that are involved for this police force and this therapist are to be familiars. Spoilers for those of you that haven't seen Blade Trinity in a while. But it is to just kind of be the easy fact of this film. So Blade has to rely on a team to help him escape from this prison, but in all actuality, in the early parts of him going on and being involved in this rescue, he leaves to go off on his own. To have him regroup with the team later to then escape, to have them take him to their honeycomb hideout. So we have Blade that ends up going on and finding out a lot of stuff about Drake that he probably is to still go on and question later about. And then also is to find out so much about the arsenal that these people have that he never did for some goofy reason. And then, of course, we go on to have Blade need to face off against a number of humans to go and find Vance, which then just turns out to a chase scene that again is to just waste more of our time. Then, by the time that there is some people on the good guy side that starts to get killed off and kidnapped, we then have to have Blade and then Abigail just like, use it, to just have these people that were just so happy-go-lucky to just murder vampires before, now all angry and ticked off to just be like, yeah, like, I've had a knife in my heart for so long of sorrow that if I were to take it out, I think I'll die. Like, where was this person at any point in this movie? How did this person just, like, become a thing now? Within this one little thing of dialogue, because Jessica Biel's character says diddly worth of anything, because Ryan's character is just so, like, non-stop dialogue in this film that no one else gets a freaking time in the sun until he's freaking kidnapped. And then all of a sudden now Jessica Biel has some stuff to say, and Summerfield has some dialogue to talk about. And then finally we're right back to, okay, now Ryan has so much dialogue that he has to just carry the rest of this movie for and just have so many yuck jokes. And, like, really, again, it's just a lot of childish humor with fucks and dicks and whatever to be said consistently here. I won't go on and swear anywhere else. I just wanted to say those things and then just carve out the rest of this movie. And so we then have forcibly the people that were supposed to be fighting through most of this film finally fight by the end of this movie. And then by then it's just like, okay, like, nothing has really escalated anywhere to make me just go on and just be like, man, these were really cool, interesting fights. Besides the Paul Levesque, Ryan Reynolds fight. That's the only thing that really looks interesting, because everything else is just like, man, I've seen more interesting, like, fight movies as far as martial arts stuff is just kind of going on in either prior Blade movies or really, like, in, like, a lot of Bruce Lee movies that I've seen more recently than this. Like I think Bruce Lee movies have now ruined me for fighting movies, because I'm just gonna go on and just being like, yeah, I've seen better. I've seen more aggressive. I've seen more interesting. Bruce Lee movies are just ruining me for other films now. Sadly enough, but it's the truth. And also, like, when Blade is to have gone on and told, like, Abigail, use it, like, how has she become a lot more aggressive? How has she changed from the early fighter that she was to being, by the end of this movie, like, what is her eventual story arc? This character is just throughout the whole entire thing being one tone of a character. Even like Hannibal King's character, like there isn't really any point where like I feel that he like grows up. I don't know, like he doesn't really change at all. So yeah, like there's no growth anywhere through any of these characters. It's just like going through the normal like day-to-day stuff for them. But then again, this could also just be kind of like how a cop is to have seen so many people murdered at this point. If someone is to just die in his home, like he is to not just be freaking out because of that, just because it's like, oh no, like I've seen so many other dead bodies that this one just like, even though it's within my family personally, like I'm not going to go on and cry about it just because like I just seen so many dead bodies at this point. So yeah, so like for Blade and Knight soccer team, like it's just another Monday. Because the vampires really have not done enough to make them give a F, to make them give a So really, like that's my ultimate just talk about this film. And let's go on and break down the film, because I'm sure that I'm going to take a million years to see all the stuff within this movie, because there's so much things to freaking say. So this movie, grading wise, is bad. So that's my grade ultimately of this film. And let's go on and say that where you can go on and see this movie, because there's probably maybe an app here somewhere where you can probably go on and see said Blade, Trinity. But I, of course, will go on and give you the run-of-the-mill normal apps that I've used for the long stretch of this time, which, of course, is to be Zelifonic, Zelivonic. You can also go on to possibly the Google Play Store and find that app, as well as also you can go to these other apps called Manic, Mannic. You could possibly go on to Vidbox, Vidbox, to possibly see this film. And then lastly, you can go on to a Google search and look for an app called HDO Box. And hopefully, after going through and finding that you have to download an APK for said app, you can go on and be able to get that app, which is to be an app that can kind of have you see a hefty, larger possible variety of a number of items. But then again, most often, most of the time, most of the other three apps will kind of get you into most of anything. I just use that last one just in case people really want to go on and explore and find a lot of content that is in a much more rarefied air. So, with that said, I'm going to go on and break down this film. So I'm going to go on and get into my normal song of dance and spoiler time thing. And then after that, I'm going to pause this video, get out my cast list and notes and whatever is to be in this brain or upon this phone, and be able to tell you what all is happening within this film. There is going to be some stuff I'm going to try as much as possible to actually just skip talking about in this movie, because it is honestly so boring to even talk about. So, really, I hope that you can understand that really with probably more than one viewing of this movie, like I would have a drastically different opinion upon this film. honestly, if I'd gone into theaters and walked out of this movie, I would probably have loved this film when it originally came out. But now that I've probably gone on and seen this movie multiple times, there's a lot of problems that I see within this film. So with that said, let's go on and let's go into spoiler time. Spoiler time. It's about that time I'm going to spoil this movie. Let me go and pause this video, and I will get out my stuff. Okay. So one thing I want to say, there were several times where I started to do this review and really had a lot of problems just figuring out where all to go with the very beginning of this review, hence why probably the very beginning is so long. Also, rationally, I was to may have repeated something that I said somewhere in the beginning of that, so, and I might just reiterate some of that somewhere in here, because I said a lot of and I don't remember any of it now. So, yeah, we're gonna go on and do this the best we can. And thank you for going on and listening to any of this. I really do appreciate it. I really do. Yeah, there are times when I probably get a lot of very much frustrated of myself, or uh, because of how long-winded, of course, I end up being. But logically, it's just also me wanting to do all this because I care a lot about what I try to go on and do. So hopefully, uh, you'll go on and be just having a good time with whatever it is that I have to go on and say about this film, whether it be positive or negative, because I'm just at the end of the day trying as best as possible to be honest. So with that said, let's go to the very beginning of this. So we have 4 vampires making their way to this temple cave like thing. And so they make their way out of this helicopter. We have, I'm assuming, Jarko, who is to give the middle finger to the sun. And because they're all just kind of wearing this just head to toe get up that is covering them, to be very much similar to Blade 2, because in Blade 1, they mostly just kind of wear sunblock, or they at some points would just kind of wear motorcycle helmets to just kind of block them from the sun. So we would have these 4 vampires, Telos, Asher, Wolf, and Jarko, making their way to this temple. And so they lift this stone and or like rock like brick from out of the ground, and that goes on to start having the floor crumble down to a point of them making their way to this almost kind of underground tomb of sorts. So we have Jarko, who of course is Paul Levesque, Triple H, and I'm waiting for eventually Up Up Down Down, which is hosted by Austin Creed, Xavier Woods, because at one point Xavier Woods was talking about how he wanted to talk to uh, Paul Levesque himself, Triple H, about this film, but for some reason I don't think that video is up yet, or maybe it has and I haven't been watching that show enough. I'm not sure, but maybe at some point it will go out, and maybe I'll check it out. If it is, let me know, but I don't know. So Jarko is talking about the chicken scratch, or the hieroglyphs that are beyond these walls, and they're called cuneiform or corniform, whatever its goofy thing is. And there is to have even have been a reason why Draco had been left here, buried here, because it is to have been the cradle of civilization. And supposedly they state that the reasoning that Draco had wanted to have been just kind of buried away is because he started to hate and loathe uh, just civilization and the human race as a whole, so he just decided to just hide from it. I'm assuming because he probably just realized that frickin' there was to have not been a legitimate, like, honorable fight to go up against, that maybe that's why he more so just left, because there is no real true honorable battle. So they go on and they take glow sticks and they're just kind of consistently tossing them down here. And we have Wolf that goes on and tells the people, it's like, well, hey, like, there's something beneath us. And like, oh, what did you find? A watch? Like, what did you find? A frying pan? So all of a sudden, we would have Wolf that ends up getting dragged under because Draco ends up awaking and he wants something to feast on. So the other vampires are trying to pull Wolf off from what we'd have to assume is Drake, and his head comes off and then he gets dusted. So the next thing we end up seeing is an interviewer who is Bentley Tittle on the show Bentley Tittle Live. So he is bringing both the character Vance and this chief of police, which I'm just going to call him Chief here because I don't really care what his name is. Really, this character is just a means of like, okay, here's this character that we're going to have as another just faceless police officer that logically is just going to be a character that is to put the boots to Ray and Wilson, who are to be the FBI guys. And yeah, it's just so let's go on and let's talk about this interviewing show. So this therapist is to go on and be Dr. Edgar Vance, the forensic psychiatrist, who had even made a book called Human Health, The Whole Being Breakthrough. So we have Bentley that is going on and asking the psychiatrist about vampires, and really the psychiatrist is going on and breaking this, or Vance is breaking this down as sexual sadism and having to go on and have a disease or an illness to be called porphyria. And so really all of this is to just have like a lot of like things that are just be like, okay, like let's make fun of these people that think that they're supposed to be vampires, but really there's just something wrong with them. And really when Bentley is to be talking to either the psychiatrist or eventually the chief about like vampires, again, it's all to just kind of make jokes or to just kind of curve the fact that there even is vampires that do actually exist. So even the chief is say, it's like, well, the only vampires that I'm worried about are the ones passing the bar. Meaning vampires. being lawyers because they're bloodsuckers, because that's the goofy, weird uh, thing that at some point sometimes people call lawyers as bloodsuckers. So, but also the chief is to be saying like, well, hey, we should be much more focusing on this this character Blade, who's a criminal, and that he's psychopathic, and that he should be pursued rather than any kind of weird other thing rumored to be vampirism or vampires or whatever. So we go and have Vance that is going on and mostly stating that for how Blade has this belief that he is going on and he's slaying monsters. If anything, he's actually killing an aspect of his own self. And we kind of consistently keep seeing that when Vance is talking to Blade through most of this film. Where Vance is going on and later talking about like, well, hey, like I think the only monster here is the one that you look at yourself in the mirror. Like, because he says that later in the film. Um, and so we then turn around and we have Blade, who is facing off against this nest of vampires. And yeah, I've seen a supernatural show in my time, so yes, uh, like a lot of this movie honestly seems a lot like the John Carpenter vampire film, and like that John Carpenter vampire film had just done a way better job than what this movie tries to do. And I just realized that now that I just wanted to have that point, but didn't think about it until now. But so, moving on. So, Blade is going on and facing off against these vampires and fighting them and dusting them. And so, a few of them end up going into these cars and he jumps over the cars, and some of them end up getting away via these motorcycles, and so Blade has to go on and chase after them. And coincidentally, Whistler is in this truck, and he is to be luckily right underneath Blade as he's passing by. A huge coincidence. So Blade is to drop on top of this truck and make his way to the back of the truck where there is a car conveniently for him to be able to then drive off of this truck, which is now he's going into traffic. So now he has to go on and just kind of turn so he can face off against these motorcycle vampires that are kind of shooting behind him. So but there will also be other cars and stuff like that for Blade to face off against here. So Blade, who he thinks, or who I thinks, is going on and running one of the motorcycle vampire guys over. It seems that that's not the case. Like the other vampire was just kind of laying in wait till he can jump on top of the windshield. But Blade is also dealing with one vampire that goes into his car, and Blade has to dust him, and then the one guy gets onto the windshield, and Blade eventually has to go on and also like take care of him uh, as well. So Blade creeps on a car that has vampires in it, and so Blade ends up using his UV high beams, and that ends up dusting the driver of this car, leaving then this other person who I believe is Gedge. In the IMDb kind of roll of things, there's just a number of certain characters that randomly have names that I don't even have any clue of who they actually are. Plus, all the names are just very goofy and childish, like they had no real thought of who they really were. But at some point, I'm probably having to be forced to have to say who they actually are, even though I could just see them being called Vampire Number One. Because why should they even have names? Because they really do nothing in this movie. So, like Wolf, Wolf had a name, and like, why does he even have a name? So, guys are going on and noticing that this car flipped, so they're dragging this guy out of the car. So, Blade is going on and putting, I'm assuming, stakes into his double barrel looking shotgun thing. And so he gets to the human and is, or human, I guess that's spoiling this moment here. Blade shoots stakes into this guy's chest, and the guy ends up being an imposter. He's actually a human, and he goes on and tells Blade so. Because it's like, well, yeah, I'm not a vampire, and he takes out the teeth, and then he dies. And so off in the distance, we have Talos, the female leader character, who is videotaping this and is going to post it online somewhere, or post it to somebody that's probably going to have this go uh, to be evidence for Blade to now be public enemy number one. So we have Blade retreat to his seemingly no-name hideout. Maybe we should call it the Blade Cave or something. I don't know. Maybe, God, what would be the name of the thing where you put your blade in? Like like how, like a bow and arrow, like how a bow, or oh, wait, or an arrow has like a quiver to go into. Um, I don't know. Come up with some kind of cool name for Blade's Cave besides Blade's Cave, or Blade's hideaway or something. I don't know, hideout. Maybe there's a legit name for Blade's place, but moving on. So we have Blade meet up with Whistler, and Whistler's like, "Well, hey, like, what the fuck happened tonight? Uh, you're getting reckless. Uh, like killing vampires are clean because they're made of ash, and so like there's no real evidence left behind. But Whistler goes on and also is to give Blade a new they call it a Eversent inhaler. So Whistler goes on and grabs him this new delivery system for Blade's serum. So instead of like the needle like in prior movies, Blade can just now just bite down on this thing and get this serum so he can stop the evil thing from getting out of him. Why can't you be nice? 'Cause the world isn't nice. I'll be going on and probably reiterating that at some point in this review. So we then transition here because Whistler is going on and hoping that Blade is not going to have this whole thing blow up and have people try to go on and manhunt him down, which is to be what exactly is to go on and happen. Because Blade's antics have already gone on to make the news, everybody's talking about it, so now the FBI regional headquarters is going on and talking about it between both Wilson and Ray, who, honestly, the guy who ends up playing Ray, I'm happy that he got a movie to be involved in, but like anybody probably could have done this role. he's another just faceless character, sadly enough. So, and also, I hated the fact that we have a movie where, like, it seems that, like, cops are getting more involved than vampires are. Man, if we could have really had it to where, like, vampires were actually, like, cops and what, like, this could have might have been a more interesting story, but this is just so dull and it just doesn't work for me. Like, it just makes me, like, have this be so much of like a police procedural kind of film, and yeah, like, ah. Anyways, moving on. So, uh, we have Wilson, we have Ray, and they're talking that they've now got a lead on the Blade case, and they're gonna have to go on and catch a plane. So we have Talos and her vampire team of of Asher and Jarko and whoever is really left at this point to just kind of talk here and their vampire characters. Because we also have a girl who is gone by the name of Virago. Virago. She is here when uh like they're talking. She's one of the vampires that has a little bit of dialogue here, and then she's also with the chief when they're going to the blood farm. And really after that, quickly forgotten. But like here she gets a little line about like, well, hey, should we be upping the security because it seems that Drake is just going on and just running through just a lot of people, and like should we be concerned about him? So Talos is going on and talking to people about like, well, hey, like kind of getting wanting an update about what Drake is doing, and really all he's doing is he's just kind of eaten through 5 people already. So Talos is like, okay, like I think he's probably had his fill. So like I want to go in there, and I honestly want to go on and talk to him. So when Talos goes in there, Drake is going from his what I'll call his like warrior form because he's like Kavan of all. He looks more like a very much monster than he does a normal human. And so Drake goes on and talks to Talos and he's like, well, hey, you shouldn't have woken me. And we have Talos is like, well, we need your blood to free us because we're thinking for somehow that we can turn your blood, your DNA, and make everybody daywalkers. But that never happens in this film. That plan never comes to fruition. As well as also like, well, hey, what is the vampire's ultimate plan? Just to have a whole entire farm that just has a bunch of humans in it, so that way they can just continue feeding. There's no real thought process done beyond that. Like just kind of how the vampires, there's no real thought process beyond. Oh, they have Dracula now. What are they really going to do with him? Oh, nothing really. They're just going to have him just kind of do whatever he wants and then fight Blade by the end of this movie. There's no like, oh, we have Dracula now. Let's use his DNA and make super vampires. That never really happens. So Drake is to, of course, be very upset with his own vampire kind because, really, because of how much their vampirism has just kind of been diluted and diluted over time. He is to just go on and realize that, like, these kind of vampires are to just be, like, just shadows of their former selves, and to not be anywhere close to what he can really and truly be. And he's more confident than seemingly any other vampire that is to be here because of his pure vampirism compared to them. He's just kind of seeing them as less than just because he just is better and pure. So the reason why Talos is also just so much more cowering is because the human race now has a hunter or a bounty hunter that really isn't the Ghost Rider. So, because really, we could have had a Ghost Rider reference here somewhere, but no, we don't have one. But so, and immediately after, like, Talos says, like, oh yeah, it's Blade, and Drake is just like, oh yeah, and you want me to go on and kill him because that's all I have going on in this entire movie. And it's like, yeah, like, we didn't really put much thought into this movie. We didn't put much writing into this film. So, transition to now, Whistler is going on and buying a newspaper, and that leads the FBI to figure out where Blade is and eventually force him to blow up his own house, his own little hideaway, his own little nook and cranny. So, Whistler goes on to buy a newspaper to come to find that Blade is being public enemy number one, and now Blade is famous. So, while Whistler goes on and buys a newspaper, there are stakeout people and there are FBI guys in a car who are going on to follow Whistler. So, Whistler slaps down this bulletin thing on Blade's desk, telling him, hey, well, you're famous now, and your face is all over the papers and all over the television. And so it seems that people are starting to go on and put together a PR campaign against you. And here's at this point where, like, Whistler is going to go on and, like, give probably the best line, if not Whistler had kind of delivered in prior films and whatever. But I really like this, how, like, Whistler is to finally break down and state, like, well, hey, like I've been doing this, like, even since before you were alive, and I'm sorry I got old on you, and, like, I see you alone, surrounded with enemies, and it breaks my heart. But then also, they're having to go on and take on the rest of the world and not just vampires, because in the other two movies, it felt like Blade facing off against vampires was a much more exclusive like thing, but now they have to figure out a way to escalate things just by now having Blade face off against humans and vampires, which still, that wasn't a real escalating thing because there's not a higher amount of stakes going on legitimately. So, transition to now having a bunch of vampires that are just these youngins that are kind of wheeling their bikes and skateboards and doing all these tricks and whatever. And so all these vampires are going on and talking about how they want to go on and eat. They're starving. And so they're just going on and just one after the other just stating like, oh, how about we just eat this person right here? How about we just eat that person right there? And no one is having a real word edgewise about it. They're just like, okay, whatever, I'll just move on. And, like, all these kids are just talking about eating people, and there isn't like a security guy called. There's like nothing, and like all these kids are just talking weird and making people uncomfortable. But I guess no one gives a no one cares. So it takes these group of kiddies to see that there's a combo meal making their way, which is a baby and a woman. Like they couldn't have gone on and found a real meal, like an actual muscular dude, or no, like you couldn't have found a just a an actual like even match to you. You just gotta have to go on and find something that you think you could just easily take down because you're starving, Marvin. So, and also one of the vampires kids are telling one of the other, it's like, well, hey man, just hurry up and choose. Like, I'm hungry, I'm starving. So the combo meal makes their way to the waterfront North Rail or subway station thing. So there ends up being that this combo meal ends appearing in the background like, oh hey baby, what's for dinner? And so the vampires make their way to combo meal. I know who the combo meal is. I'm just kind of building up this suspense here. So they go on, they attack this woman, they grab this baby, they start undressing the baby, and we have the vampire attacking the woman, saying, like, scream if this hurts, chica, which of course is Spanish for woman. Chica. Maybe they're just really fanatics of Five Nights at Freddy's, so they just call everybody Chica. I don't know. But this was well before Five Nights at Freddy. I get it. So, oh my god, we're almost at an hour, and I've barely gone into this film. So, the guys grab the baby and realize that it says fuck you on it, and there ends up being a spray of garlic being put into this guy's eyes, and he ends up shouting that it's garlic. So, they realize that they've kind of been had here. That we have this combo meal woman end up actually being Abigail. And so she hits her boot, and a blade comes out of her boot. And so she starts going on and knifing people either in the chest with her boot, or to go on and start to take them down via the heads, or whichever, starting to dust them. So she ended up taking off her outfit in a very superhero, Superman like fashion and whatever. And so she also was to early on use the UV arc thing, which looks like a bow and arrow, but has like this light instead of a bowstring, which they call the UV arc. And then they explain what the UV arc is, because logically you can't have an all explanation of weaponry right early on in this film to be like, oh, what is that? I don't know. It doesn't really matter. Like, it's just a weapon. But they have to take time later in the film to explain what it is. Whatever. So, we then have, of course, Abigail, who doesn't have a huge number of lines here. So she has to reuse the exact same line that the other kid had told her, like, scream if this hurts, chica. And then she has this just kind of knife weapon come out to stab into this guy, killing him off. So moving on. So Whistler is looking at his wedding ring as we come to find that Abigail is to be Whistler's daughter, because Whistler had kind of married out of wedlock, and or whatever, he got married, kind of. And he had this daughter, and we'll get into that. So Blade is going on and meditating, it seems, because more than likely that's the way for him to try to go on and subvert the thirst. And also, I would see Blade going on and like doing this in the Blade series. So I guess that might have been one thing that they probably took from this movie. I'm not quite sure, but moving on. Uh, Whistler goes on and eventually is to come to find that Blade is to be just kind of standing up and he has all his gear on. And so Wesley's like, well, or Wesley, Whistler is like, hey, like, what's going on? And Blade is like, well, like, what you've always worried about is that the humans are just kind of coming after us. So Blade doesn't even go on and give Whistler time to like get all of his together and wipe everything off. Like he has to scramble and do now and get this shotgun. And so that basically leads to Whistler's demise because Blade did not give him a heads up here. So they start throwing tear gas. Ryan and Wilson are like, hey, let's go. Everybody just break in a guy that's heavily skilled and we should be able to easily take him down, right? Because like we have no idea like how skilled Blade really is. We could have gone on and just kind of staked out like how actually well combative skilled trained he is and then try to take him down when he's completely caught off guard. Anyways, so Whistler's going on and de-encrypting all of the computers and having them crash and explode. So during this, we would have Whistler with this shotgun, and he continues to try to take some of these guys down, but he ends up getting shot in the leg and shot in the back. So Blade is going on facing off against these men, but he's not using, I think, lethal force. He's having his blade being put in its sheath or whatever, and he's trying to like knock them down and not legitimately, I feel, kill any of them. Because he doesn't know whether or not they're familiars or not, so he's just not trying to go on and kill all of these people. So by the time that Whistler gets to the last computer and the cops are swarming around him, they go on and they tell him like, hey, don't move a finger. And he's like, well, hey, how about I move this one finger? And he gives him the finger. And then Whistler shouts out, get out, Blade, as Whistler detonates this whole area and freaking wipes this whole place out. Ray is on the walkie, like, hey, somebody say something. So Blade is now on the pier and he is looking on at the fact that Whistler is now dead. And so he is mourning that loss, but then also he's just like, hey, what should I do here? Because these police officers are kind of surrounding me. So we get to the police department where Blade, I guess, had gotten arrested. They didn't show that part. He's just like kind of sitting, something or other, and the police are surrounding him, so we don't see the cuff being slapped on him. So Ray and Whistler go on and they're waking Blade up. Didn't know that he was to have gone on and fallen asleep at some point. I don't know, maybe they took forever to finally interrogate Blade. So maybe he's just been in this room for a very long time. I don't know what. But so they have to go on and introduce themselves as FBI and that they're Ray and Wilson. Doesn't matter. They're just kind of faceless characters for them to just hand over their guy to the vampires, basically. So Blade goes on and asks about Whistler. It's like, hey man, he's dead, and like how many other people that you've killed? Like what is it? 30, 40, 50? How many people? And Blade says the exact same number, or says the exact number that he can think of in his head, which is 1,182. So, but they were supposedly all familiar, so it's all good. So, all of a sudden Ray and Wilson are talking about like, well, hey, like, also let's talk about vampires. Does garlic always work? Do crosses work on Jewish people? And this and that. Like, do Hindu people like are they not affected by garlic if they're vampires? Like, do you have to get saffron or on them and use that? Stupid crap that is just a waste. Like making fun of people that probably do believe in like vampires and whatever is to really be entailed on that. So we bring in Vance in and like, oh, thank God, now we have another person that is just going to eat up more time here and really eventually like just boast on the fact that he's a human that took Blade down by doing nothing. So Vance comes in because he's going to give Blade a psychiatric evaluation. So he ends up introducing himself, and so he starts asking Blade, it's like, well, hey, do you know what day it is? Do you know what president is to be the president? Oh, just some asshole. Oh, okay, well. So we have Vance that goes on to be like, oh, well, I guess somebody just really wants to talk about vampires. And so Vance starts to talk about, like, well, yeah, like when I was 7 years old, I had the plastic waxed teeth. And also, like, Vance is to go on and say, it's like, well, yeah, like, most of the time, the scariest monster is the one that we're looking at in the mirror. And weirdly, like, Vance has to just keep relating vampirism with, like, just sexuality or sexual arousal. And there's a bit of sexual confusion going on with the nuzzling in someone's neck or a nocturnal visit and the delusion of physical intimacy makes him go on and question the relationship that Blade is to have gone on and had with his mother. And that's when Blade kind of gives him the stink eye, and then Vance is just like, oh, okay. So Vance goes back to talk to the FBI agents and it's like, well, hey man, yeah, he's definitely a psychopath. Like I'm recommending to transfer him to county psychiatrics. And we have Raid, we have Wilson's like, no, like don't fuck with my things. This is my thing. Don't F with it. Blah blah blah. So the chief comes in, it's like, well, yeah, like I've already decided that like Vance is right, like he should take Blade and this and that. So the main reason of that is because both of them shake hands and they're both familiars. Both the chief and both Vance are both familiars. Like, all right. So Vance goes in there, or back in there, and is to pump Blade full of drugs. Instead of putting him into 200 to 300 cc's of drugs to pump into Blade, instead he's going to put in a couple of thousand. So, because of course Blade being the hybrid that he is, like, and be as strong as he is, yeah, like, they need to really bump up the drugs. So, Vance is also stating that how Blade is weak right now because he doesn't have his serum, and that immediately makes Blade realize, like, oh, you're one of their familiars. That's why you know about the serum. So, and also Vance is like, well, what, why would ever a human being like me overpower a guy like you? So, Vance is to reveal that he's been familiar for 5 years now, and Blade, of course, is to hate familiars, as Vance is to walk off to let the drugs kind of sift in here. So Blade is all of a sudden starting to remember some of the stuff that Whistler has already said in this film. It's why we're still alive, goddammit. You're like a son to me. I'm sorry I got old on you. I see you alone, surrounded by enemies. Blah, 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 all that jazz. So, we have Talos, Asher, and Jarko, and just a number of other people just kind of behind them. So, Talos is going on and just kind of signing in to make their way to meet up with Blade. So, Talos ends up talking to Blade and is like, hey, like the tattoos, do they mean anything? So, Talos is just kind of cracking jokes and telling Blade that there's no one coming for him. And then right after that, we, of course, have Hannibal King that crashes through and immediately is to debunk that whole fact. So, Hannibal King starts to get occupied with Jarko here, while Hannibal King had grabbed Blade his serum to give to him. And so Blade is now powering up with his serum. So when Blade does actually power up, Blade faces off against Jarko and he kicks him, and Jarko goes flying through this wall. And you would have thought that either one of the characters, like Blade, would just be walking through that wall and continuing on. But no, like, he goes out of his way to just go through the door and then just continues onward. So, Hannibal King and Blade are facing off against some police officers. And then they see Whistler, who is Abigail. And so, because Hannibal would go on and say Whistler, and they're trying to figure out where they're going. And so Blade ends up hearing Whistler and realizes, oh, it's Abigail. So, because he already knows that it's Whistler's daughter. So, they start making their way, and all of a sudden they're left with this one kind of fork in the road here. And Jarko is telling Blade, it's like, Blade, you're dead! And humans are killing vampires. Not really vice versa, because the humans can't kill the vampires because they don't have any real actual silver bullets in their guns. So Blade ends up going at this point, like, kind of going back and falls back with both Hannibal King and Abigail here, but then he leaves the group to go into the vents or into the ceiling tiles because he wants to go back for his sword because he forgot about his sword. So Hannibal King is very frustrated at this point because he's like, hey, this was a rescue. This was supposed to be. So now Hannibal King and Abigail are like, well, they're pinned down now. And Hannibal tells Abigail that he can't shoot corners. So we would, of course, have Abigail who can because she's good at archery. So she can go on and now have these very weird, like, weapons at her disposal. She goes on and is to ricochet this one arrow to hit a guy in the chest. And the guy pulls out the arrow, and it's this UV arrow. And Jarko sees it, and he runs off. As it goes off, then she also is to take an arrow and have it, like, go all the way through this door that ends up killing one of the other vampires. So now both Abigail and both Hannibal make their way completely out of this facility, and there's just a bunch of cop cars that are all there, and we're thinking like, oh, they're gonna get caught again and just be like, oh, okay, well, we're fucked. So all of a sudden, Blade just comes flying out, and he's like, yeah, I forgot my sword. And all of a sudden, we have Dex, who's coming out with this big vehicle, this SUV, and he's picking everybody up. And so now Blade has to go on and get an intro of who all these people are. So Dex is the guy driving. Hannibal ends up stating that uh, that the girl that's with him is Abby, and all of a sudden we see Jarko that is running to get to all these guys, and so like Hannibal is telling Abby to take care of that, which just means that Abby shoots Jarko in the eye, and he'll eventually rip that out of his eye later on. So then, of course, Hannibal King ends up explaining that he is Hannibal King, and that Abigail is Abigail, Whistler's daughter, and they don't much explain that. Besides, when they actually get to the hideout, then they finally explain that they're the Night Stalkers and this and that they're a sleeper cell agency. So we have Blade that goes on to ask Abigail about, like, well, I thought they had killed Whistler's family. And Abigail says, like, no, like, well, technically they did, but I was born later out of wedlock. So when she came of age, she tracked Whistler down, and she wanted in. She wanted to be part of what Whistler had been doing most of his life. So Hannibal King is welcoming Blade into the Honeycomb hideout, and Blade goes on and asks Hannibal, it's like, well, how do you guys afford all this? And Hannibal's like, well, I date older men. Goofy joke. So then Hannibal goes on to explain who are all the rest of the people that Blade doesn't know. The driver, of course, was Dex. Patton Oswalt's character is Hedges. And there's to be Summerfield, who's kind of the sciencey blind girl. And she had gone on to make the new serum inhaler that Blade has gone on to use. And the girl that they end up seeing as they made their way to the Honeycomb hideout, the little girl that they spotted was actually Zoe, the little runt. So they call themselves the Night Stalkers, and immediately Blade is just like, well, it sounds like a Saturday morning cartoon reject show. And so Hannibal hits him with, well, we were going to call ourselves the Care Bears, but that was taken. Sorry. So they end up stating about the whole sleeper cell thing, and that there's enough of them to just kind of keep on trucking. And so supposedly they were put together to help out Blade. And Blade is like, you're not skilled enough to roll with this. Like, look at yourselves. Like, fuck you. Like, what is that supposed to mean? Like, look at the way you dress. Is that supposed to be tactical? So, is it some kind of joke that you're just gonna just put on here? Like, so Abigail tells Blade, it's like, well, hey, like it or not, like, we're all you've got. So, like, just suck it up there, buddy. So we even have Blade even further question. It's like, well, how is it you know anything about vampires whatsoever and about hunting them? And so we have Hannibal that lifts down his pants, and he ends up, of course, showing that he was, of course, one of them. He was a familiar at one point, and also he was technically a vampire. And he's like, well, did I pass the audition now? So back at the Drake lair, we have Talos that's upset that Hannibal King had freed Blade, and that she states that she is to have wanted to rip out his heart when she had the chance. So we have Asher that goes on and states that they were caught with their pants down, but then uh, Jarko ends up stating it's like, oh, we were butt raped and this and that. I'm like, whatever, man. Like, you didn't have to go on and say that shit. Come on. So we have Talos that is asking like, well, hey, is Drake aware of his failure? Like, if I would have been Drake, I would have just been like, dude, I knew that you already were gonna go on and fail. So like, that wasn't expected in my brain of thinking that you guys were gonna fail. It's like, when are you gonna fail, and how bad are you gonna fail? So Drake comes in, and he's like, oh yeah, like knowing about your failure, like, uh, maybe it's time I join the game. Yeah, he's gonna be doing so much to just put freaking uh a wrench into just Blade's plan. Yeah, I'm sure. So we then have to go on and have Hannibal King explain who all of the vampire characters are, if I haven't already explained who they possibly are anyways. Because we just have to keep knowing who people are in this movie and just like wasting so much time. So Hannibal King goes on and explains that Talos is to be the girl who has so many red flags when you go on and meet her, but you still ask for her phone number anyways. And because she just screams trouble and you see her and every warning bell is going off in your brain, but still, you get them digits. So then he goes on and explain about Asher, uh, who is to just be her brother, and uh, the walking diaper stain is to be Jarko, who is to be Triple H's character. So Hannibal is to state that he was 5 years a vampire playing hide and go sock. And eventually Abigail found him, and for whatever reason, Summerfield had gave him the cure, which, how is it that they couldn't have gone on and just figured out a way to just cure all vampires? Baffles me, but whatever. So, but for somehow Hannibal just had the ability to get a cure, and so now he kills them instead of is to be one of them. So turning a frown upside down is what he is to have compiled all that to be. So Abigail is going on and stating that they need to pool their resources to the mutant Deadpool, or to the mutant killer Deadpool. Oh man, I ruined that joke. So they go on and toss on the Tomb of Dracula, which of course is to be a Marvel book that is eventually have Blade in it. Whatever, it is what it is. So Blade is turning to the guys and like, you gotta be kidding me. It's like, no, we gotta go on and give you all of this goofy crap that we just stole somewhere. That is to be all these sigils and all these hieroglyphs and all of this crap that they had gone on and just have to like figure out who Dracula is, because all of a sudden now it seems to be actually important for them to look into all of this garbage. So they end up finding, I guess, one of Dracula's armor, and via computer they had figured out and pieced together what Dracula could actually look like somewhat. So, but they are also to state that, like, well, books and movies on this guy, like, are just a comforting fairy tale to the real thing. And Bram Stoker had gone on and had a good yarn, but really, like, this character has been alive for way earlier than that. So supposedly 7,000 years is what they state somewhere in this movie. So they talk about ancient Samaria. They go on and they say that Drake was the first of his kind to be a patriarch of Humerus Nocturna, whatever that means. He was born perfect, and just like the great white shark, he's never needed to evolve. Forget the movies, forget the books, folks. There's no happy ending with this guy. He's been there, moving behind the scenes, cutting a bloody path through the ages until suddenly he up and disappeared. And hating and hating his kind and wanting to just go in seclusion and this and that. Some say he's been sleeping through the ages, and according to our information, he's been found in Iraq about 6 months ago. So wait a minute. So like Drake had been caught by the vampires, and they've been having him for 6 months, and Drake has just been doing nothing at frickin' all to help out the vampires up until now. What the fuck? That makes no goddamn sense. So maybe like they've just been going on and just consistently feeding Drake to just build up his strength so he can like, or maybe he's just been hitting the gym. I don't know. Maybe he just needed that 6 months to get up to date as far as martial arts is concerned. I don't know. Maybe he's been like Bruce Wayne before he turned himself into Batman. Maybe he just needed like a refresher on what's going on, keeping up with the times. I don't know. So he retreated from a world that he became disgusted with. And when they went on to revive him, he was pissed. So now we go on to transition to now having Drake make his way into the world, and he's walking through and he comes to find this one store that he's like, well, hey, yeah, I saw that in the window you guys have vampire merch. What does that mean? So like the whole entire store is just full with vampire stuff, and so the guy behind the counter is like, well, yeah, man, just look around, you can just find everything here. So the goth vixen, because the other guy is just goth guy, the goth vixen goes on and just describes everything that he should already be seeing to him. And so there's this one plushie where it goes on and they touch it and it starts talking about garlic and whatever. And so the girl starts talking about vampire vibrators. Obviously, that should have been called Vambrators. Vamp Braiders? That would have probably made a lot more sense. But then also there's to be Dracula, Count Dracula cereal, and all kinds of stupid garbage. So, Dracula, she goes on and says, makes you cry, doesn't it? So, Drake is to go on and look at this girl, and so the clerk guy is like, well, hey, like the goth guy is like, hey, she's talking to you, bud. And so Drake immediately looks at the guy, and the guy behind the counter is like, hey, you want to kiss me, pretty boy? So goth guy goes out the window, and then Drake goes on and is grabbing this girl and forcing her down to this kind of weird, goofy chair that kind of looks like either a dentist chair or a barber chair, and he is to drink her blood, and then is to have a very deforming face that is poorly CGI'd, and he has blood coming down his face, and he's like, ah! And I'm like, what point does this make to any of this movie? But anyways, pushing on. So they're now having the group talking about the vampire final solution within Abigail, Blade, and Hannibal. Really, they have no idea what the vampire final solution is, but they know it exists. The vampire solution is just the stupid blood farm thing, which really isn't a good solid plan. It's just putting away a hobo for cold storage. Millions of hobos, like 2 to 3 million of them, supposedly. So, but there's a whole hesitation about possibly the vampires wanting to just kill off the human race because they also need them as a food source. So, but still, the final solution is just farming them out. So, but they also say that Drake is to be possibly part of the final resolution plan or whatever, or the yeah. But they can't figure out what exactly that is because the vampires don't even know. They really don't. So here's when they go on and talk about the whole, like, yeah, we're fighting a losing battle, as if this is going to be like a PSA announcement or some infomercial that like yeah, we go on and we knock down like a couple hundred of them a year, big deal, but there are like hundreds of thousands of them. And so we then have Summerfield that is talking about the little show and tell, the biological weapon, their final solution plan. And so they're talking about this virus targeted arrow projectile thing that is supposed to go and be used against vampires, of course. And so they call it Daystar. And so the big thing of this is they're going to need Dracula's blood because his blood is pure and all the other ones have just kind of gotten diluted over time. And so they have, of course, this thing that they're working for or going to use, but it's not really tested. So they're not quite sure of its efficiency and this and that, blah, 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 blah. But they're saying how, like, if this really does work, then all the vampires end up going bye-bye. So here's where Hannibal King goes on and is to talk to Blade about the Dakota Ring, and then they set him up with knowing about all of the tech that they have. So here's where Patton Oswalt's character comes in, and we then have, of course, Hannibal that ends up telling Edge, "Hey man, have you ever gotten laid?" And he's like, "Yes, plenty of times with women." So first, they whip out the electronic pistol, which is to be, I guess, not looking as a normal gun. And so they have a variety of different calibers instead of just your normal standard hollow points, whatever that is. So they also use UV light and weaponize that as well. And they end up calling him sun dogs. But then I never really hear them ever again end up saying the word sun dogs beyond this point. But then they also have some individual combat weapon that was to have been something from the army. And so this thing, I guess, can hold a lot more, whether it could be sundongs, stakes, uh, and this and that. So, but it, of course, isn't a more effective weapon than the sword, whatever. So then they end up explaining the weapon that they used earlier in the film, which is to be the UV arc. We have Abigail that ends up having to go on and explain that it's connected by a very powerful UV laser, and it's half as hot as the sun, and it can cut through vampires like butter. Moving on. Moving on. So they go on and they also talk about Drake, about how he has the ability to shapeshift, and that, like, he can't go on and transform into possible animals or bats like any other thing would go on and tell you, but like other people with practice could be perfected. So because supposedly Drake, unlike all the other vampires, like has a weird, goofy skeletal structure, kind of more like a snake, or just has weird, just 1,000 tiny bones or whatever. So now the game plan is to hunt down familiars. And so Blade is with Hannibal and Abigail and walking down to this car. And so they're saying, since, like, well, hey, since we're having to fight somebody during the daylight, I guess it's going to have to be familiars because we have nothing better to do here. So because the humans during the day end up doing all of the vampires' dirty work. So we have this goofy little catchphrase about we bleed the wannabes, is what Blade says here, and that actually is really cool. So they go into the vehicle and they realize that Abigail is putting her playlist together, trip hop, whatever goofy music that it seems Abigail is into. But then again, Hannibal is just a David Hasselhoff fan. I think he should have went with probably more of like Barry Manilow or some other kind of goofy reference, but he went with David Hasselhoff. So let's go on. All this is just a huge montage of Blade, Hannibal, and Abigail going on and just beating up a bunch of humans. Let's kind of fast track through the more important part of eventually when they're hanging a guy upside down and realize that he has a phone that just leads them right back to Vance. Wow, what a shocker there. They did all of this crap for basically nothing. All of this was just lead them right back to where Vance is, and what a shocker there. They should have done that all along. They wasted all this time beating up all these humans just to need to go to Vance anyways. They should have figured out where Vance was. There is a whole entire building that is just to be called Vance Institutes. I don't think that this guy is that hard to find. So also, when this human was hanging upside down and he eventually hands over Blade his phone, I'm like, this seems very much like breaking down so much of this movie could mostly look like the Arnold Schwarzenegger film Commando. And there's a legitimate scene where Arnold is hanging up a guy upside down, and he's like, you know what, I told you I was going to save you for last, I lied, and then he drops him. Like, also, so much about this movie is just like another just cop on the edge kind of film, but then also just kind of also reminds me of the original Punisher film, where Punisher is going on and hanging the guy upside down and putting popsicles in his back for information. Same effing movie. So Blade is wanting to ask this human familiar guy for his handler, and this guy doesn't know who the handler is. He swears, but then again, the phone goes off, and like Blade doesn't know whose phone it is. It's like, oh, it must be this guy's, the familiars. So, like, okay, gimme. So Blade ends up going on to answer the phone, and it has the name Vance on it. And so it's like, hello? Hello, this is Dr. Vance, you paged me. And so Blade goes on and hand over the phone back to the familiar and be like, oh, this is for you, go ahead, because you're gonna drop and you're gonna lose your head first, because that's what Blade teases him with. So the familiar drops, and the three of the hero characters walk away. And Hannibal goes on and tells Blade, it's like, you know what, at some point, like, you should probably consider sitting down with somebody, talking about your inner child, that sort of thing, you know? Maybe at some point you should probably think about blinking. It's once in a while, you know? And he's like, oh, I'm sorry, I had a lot of sugar today. Blade walks off. Hannibal asks Abigail, like, he eats me, doesn't he? And Abigail's like, yes, he does. So they make their way to Vance Institute, which again shouldn't have been a very hard building to find. So they start rummaging through this building and beating up familiars along the way, or just human guys that are just trying to protect Vance here. When they go on and ask where Vance is, they're like, oh, I'm sorry, you can't see Dr. Vance now. So by the time they actually do make it to Vance, Vance isn't really Vance because he's actually Drake. And Drake is actually laying on the ground. He's dead because he's been consumed by Drake. So Drake is now holding the face of Vance, but probably not much else. So the closer and closer that Hannibal and Drake get to Vance, the more they realize he's Drake. Oh, Jesus, it's him. Abigail, it's Drake. So by the time that they go on and try to shoot at Drake, he then drops and then actually becomes Drake. So Drake grabs Hannibal, and so when Drake sees Blade, he's like, oh, you're the hunter they've been talking about. That's the hunter that they all fear. And so we have Drake that is going on and stabbing into Hannibal here and telling him, it's like, well, hey, show me what you're made of. And Drake shoves Hannibal out of the way, breaks through this window. And so this scene here is basically anything you can do, I can do the exact same freaking thing consistently. So Blake runs, drops on this car. Blade does the exact same thing, drops on the car. They do the whole same scene again and again. One person breaks through a wall, another person needs to break through a wall. Somebody breaks through a door, another person has to break through the door. Somebody walks up a flight of stairs, Blade has to go on and jump halfway into the stairs to get to Drake. It's a lot of chasing, it's a lot of garbage, it's a lot of wasted time. Drake goes on and is to find a woman with a baby, grabs the baby so he has a hostage, and so all this is to be left with them getting to this rooftop. So we have a woman going, oh, my baby, and so Blade realizes that Drake has a baby. So Blade tries to get closer to Drake as he's already just hopped on this one part of the rooftop, and we have Drake going on to be like, hey, careful, I have a baby. I'll let it go. Be careful, Daywalker. So we really almost at this point right now, like, have Blade's weakness be similar to Superman and Superman 2, where Zod had gone on to tell Superman, it's like, oh, like, I understand his weakness now. His love for these humans. And so that's where Zod turns around and starts defeating Superman, because they realize, like, that they can't as easily use kryptonite against him, but they can use these humans against him. And that's where Superman just starts to really get beaten up, and uh and almost want to relinquish his powers uh again, to just have it all be just a switcheroo. So Drake goes on and is to talk about Whistler and how he died, but he says, like, well, hey, yeah, it was a good death. And Blade is just like, well, yeah, I wouldn't know anything about death. And then, of course, Blade asks Drake about the whole sunlight thing, and and so Drake talks about the Stroker fable, and that he's one of the first vampires, he's unique, blah 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 blah. So the only reason why that the other vampires brought him back is because of that, because he's the only one that could be as equal to Blade as humanly possible. So Blake ends up saying that this supposedly the plan of the other vampires is to through him become daywalkers, but that's never going to happen. So Drake starts talking about the human race and how they're basically just insects to him, because he's seeing them from so far away, realizing that they're eventually to just be some bug to be crushed. So, and how they know nothing about honor and they know nothing about dying by the sword or living by it. But it's something that Blade and Drake know very well. And that how the human race knows nothing about being immortal. So here's where Blade starts about the hundreds of guys that would stake that they had gone on and possibly stated that they were Dracula or to have been close to him, but eventually they had all met to the end of Blade's sword. And I could have just said Blade's blade. And Drake goes on and states, like, well, perhaps I'll meet that end too. But I think that's more unlikely until the next time they meet. So, but also there's a chance that Blade will fall by Drake's blade as well. So, Drake goes on, tosses the baby, and by the time Blade catches the baby, he looks back to realize that Drake has now disappeared. He's now gone. So, Blade just takes care of the baby, Kushiku, and God, it's just so freaking ridiculous. So, Hannibal is talking to Abigail, like, oh my God, did you see that guy? We're gonna lose. Oh, we're gonna lose. And then he makes a stupid joke about lesbian vampires and what they say to one another. And he ends up saying, like, I'll see you in the next 28 days, kind of bring up the next time of the month as a joke. So Abigail ends up pumping Hannibal with this elastic protein thing that is supposed to stop him from bleeding. And he's like, well, is it going to hurt? It's probably going to sting a little. And it hurts way worse than what she's saying. So Abigail is just filled with blood all over her bate. And she's making her way back to the honeycomb hideout. And so she's starting to remember things that Whistler had gone on and told her about how I had a family once, wife, two daughters. Then a drifter came, calling one evening, a vampire. They toyed with him at first. The vampire made him decide which order that they were going to die in, and Whistler goes on and tells Abigail that he's been doing this for a very long time, and since before Abigail was born, and she never, or Whistler never wanted Abigail anywhere apart of that kind of lifestyle. And I guess that was to have been the thing that Whistler told her before Abigail joined in, I'm assuming. So Abigail goes on to get in the shower and is to just try to wash off all the blood. So Hannibal goes on and talks to Abigail and Blade, and Hannibal says to Blade, it's like, well, hey, like, you know what, even if we do win and, like, Drake ends up getting defeated, what are you going to do, Blade? Are you just going to be teaching karate at the local Y? Which means, like, YMCA, like a gym or community center, for those of you that don't know what a Y is, because maybe you don't have one. So, again, like, this is a thing where Blade just kind of walks off, and Hannibal asks, like, well, he hates me, doesn't he? So, we also have Drake that is talking to Talos, and there's a whole scene here about Talos having a cross, which I'm going to try as much as possible to skip around, because she's wearing this cross because she was a Catholic girl at one point, and Drake wants her to take it off, and because he's going to give her a new one, which I don't know if he ever really does. But all this is to just have Drake go on and drain Talos of blood. And Drake could also say that he was to have been witnessed to Jesus getting crucified for the human race's sins, not his. And Abigail talks about, like, well, what's your sins? And that's where they kind of get into it and they start making out. And right before he goes on and we transition here, he talks about how killing one person is murder, killing a million is a king, and then killing them all is a god. And that is to be a, ooh, wow, this is a really cool quote. Because I had gone on and later after the fact kind of look at what were the more popular quotes of this movie, and this was one of them. So, it seems. So, Blade takes the serum, and here is where him and Zoe are having this talk, and he talks about how the world isn't nice. I'm not going to repeat that whole quote. I basically already said it. I'm trying to skip as much as possible because I realized we're almost at 2 hours. So, Blade, Abigail, and Hedges, the Patton Oswalt character, is talking to Summerfield, and they're talking about the vampires going on and buying a large amount of assortment of supplies. Bio Medical Enterprises to be this company, and that makes Hedges go on and ask Abigail. It's like, well, hey, like, what do you need as party favors? And Abigail is just like, well, silver hollow points because they're going hunting. So here's where we have that girl that I'd already explained in the early part of the film that I'm probably going to forget her name, and the chief. So I've kind of already prepped this, but I don't really give a about this girl's name. She ends up getting quickly killed over her body being dusted all over this one top of this car. And so when Blade is to threaten this chief to be like, hey man, like, you need to, like, tell me what's behind door number 1, what's at this facility. And the chief is like, well, hey man, like, I'm not going to tell you because these people will kill me. It's like, motherfucker, I'll kill you now. And if anything, like I'll enjoy it. So they go on and they discover that this is to be a blood farming facility, and that's all I'm going to go into. We come to find homeless people there. I'm not going to go into all this. So Blade ends up going on, and after he gets this information about what this all is, he tells the chief, I'll give you 20 seconds, you get a running start, And so Blade just says the word 20 and he fires upon the guy. It's like, I given enough time. And so Blade ends up going on and talking to the girl. It's like, okay, what password do you have for shutting this whole thing down? She says harvest, and he's like, put it in. She does. It all shuts down. So while Blade is shutting that down, it seems that Drake is turning around and shutting down the honeycomb hideout. So Summerfield and Zoe are reading some Wizard of Oz book. So Dex and Hedge are playing basketball, and they're gonna get killed by Drake because we'll see the blood trail and everything like that. So Summerfield tells Zoe to hide like he told her, or like she told her, and Summerfield is eventually going to make her way through this place because supposedly the lights are being weird. So Drake is to look like Whistler and make his way through this honeycomb hideout. So by the time that Drake makes his way to Hannibal, Hannibal's like, dude, you're dead, because he's looking like Whistler, but realizes that it's actually Drake. So after Drake does something to Hannibal that makes him just disappear, we turn around and then have Drake more focused on Summerfield and killing her off. So we also have Zoe that's hiding in this ventilation shaft, and Drake is to come after her, and it's to start to stretch out his hand, and Zoe freaks out. So now that I've covered all of that as quickly as I can, Abigail and Blake make their way back to the honeycomb hideout, and as they're to find multiple people dead, there's be these shower curtain looking like things that end up saying immortals will come to suck as are fit for it, or immortality will come to suck as are fit for it, whatever that means. So Abigail finds that Summerhold is to be kind of just hung. It's very weird. So I guess it's symbolism and whatever. So Abigail cuts Summerfield down, and this is the iconic use it, and the girl's like, ah, use it, gosh darn it. So Hannibal ends up awakening next to some vampire Pomeranians, and so Asher ends up explaining that this dog is called Pac-Man, and they've been experimenting with putting vampire genes in other species like this dog here. So we then have Hannibal that talks about a big dick upon the dog, and that it's bigger than eventually it seems to be. But they say the whole thing about a big dick thing, the dog having a bigger dick than. I keep saying the word. And it seems directed at Jarko, but then again, he's like, oh, like, when have you ever seen my dick? Brr! And like Hannibal is just like, well, I'm talking about Talos. So I've already almost gone over the time of this movie, and I'm hopefully at the home stretch here at some point. So Hannibal is directing this to Talos, and so Talos ends up going on and looking at Hannibal. It's like, man, your blood is it's kind of bland. Like, are you getting too many fatty acids in your diet, lover? So she goes on and she starts talking about these weird foods like trouts and what it's goofy and whatever. I'll just spit through past that. So he ends up talking about like, well, how about a take of sugary frosted fuck off of the end of my dick and this and that. And so Talos is to be just kind of frustrated that everybody just keeps saying the word dick everywhere. So she's just like, well, hey, like nobody say that anymore. It provokes my envy. Whatever. So we now have Talos who's going on and asking Hannibal about uh, the heroes' plans. What are the good guys? What are they planning? So Hannibal goes on and says, well, first, your haircut is ridiculous, which honestly it actually is. But I guess it just makes her a unique character. But still, her haircut just looks just. Ugh. Uh, it almost looks very Ace Ventura like. It really is. So, and second, he ate a lot of garlic and he just farted silent but deadly. So they're saying like, okay, what is the actual plan? As he ends up getting punched in the face by Jarko. So he's like, okay, it's a new flavor, crystal formula, chocolatey goodness, half the calories, blah blah blah. Like as if it's some like freaking diet bar or something. So plus it prevents you from tooth decay, whatever. So stupid. We finally have like Talos is like, well, you know what? Like, since you're still wearing our familiar sign upon your chest, like I'm gonna give you the thing that you probably fear the most about wanting to be one of us again, and that she states that she's gonna bite him again and wait till he twists and he turns and he's been a vampire for days and days until finally until they think that he is just thirsted enough. And then they're going to bring in Zoe. And she's going to go on and watch uh, Hannibal feed off of Zoe. And be like, oh, will you like that? Would you like that, King? Huh? Will you enjoy taking her life, King? Would you? So, here's a stupid thing where Blade is going on and asking Abigail, like, how you feeling? Because all that murder and death you just had of all your best friends, like, I'm sure, like, I need to ask you how's it going? So, here's where Abigail's like, well, yeah, like, I have the knife of sadness in my heart, and if I take it out, I'll die. Whatever. So, he's like, well, hey, don't let it turn inward. As long as it's in there, I'm strong and I'm untouchable. But the moment I take it out, I'll just die. The blade of sadness. So we have to see Hannibal. We have to see Abigail doing target practice to create this cross on this target thing. And I'm like, why did that have to be a thing? More time to just waste here. So Blade and Abigail are now to get ready to have bizarrely Colder come in. So Colder is to come in to be their driver because, again, sleeper cells within this whole organization. But Colder is to also tell both Abigail and Blade that they have a message from Summerfield before she died. So a lot of this message is to have Summerfield talk about the books that she read to Zoe, and then also to let Blade know it's like, well, hey, we never tested this on a daywalker that's kind of a hybrid here. So maybe it might not affect you, or maybe it will. We don't really know. we've never really tested this, so basically you're fucked. So, really, I'm just gonna go on and bounce through that so I can just kind of skip through all that. So the guy goes on and is to state like, okay, like we have a very small amount of Daystar, and like we can only like outfit it to be put into some weapon or to also be attached to some arrow, which that ends up being the case here. So he tells him it's like, well, yeah, like you guys have to make this first shot count because you're not going to get a second one. So this is going to be a one off. So we have Zoe who's speaking to Drake here, and she calls him the Gnome King. And so Drake ends up telling the girl, it's like, well, hey, like, you know what? Like, I can go on and, like, I can turn you and you can be a child forever. Like, wouldn't you like that? Like, wouldn't you like to be a child forever? And also, like, Drake is like, tell me, it's like, do you want to die? And the girl's like, well, yeah, like, I'm fine with going to die because I know I'll go to heaven. And Drake is like, there is no heaven. No God, no angels. The only thing in your future is nothingness. Uh, so Zoe is going on of like, well, my friends are coming to kill you. Better shake in your boots now, Drake. So now we get the whole montage of like, you know, when Batman and Robin in the Batman Robin movie would go on and start to get all of their gear up, and you would see like their butts shake and their chest wiggle in their outfits as they're putting them on. That's kind of what Abigail and Blade are doing right now. They're like, bizarrely, they're like testing their weapons to make sure that they're working, and they're like targeting their gun to make sure, and then they end up both getting on their motorcycles and they make their way to finally get to Hannibal because they just were effing off this whole entire time until they realized, oh yeah, we should probably make it to figure out how we can get to Hannibal now, because we really should just be focusing on that. So Hannibal is getting clocked by Jarko and or Jaco. I don't know. I don't really know or care anymore. It's Triple H. It's Paul Levesque. So Asher is going on and talking and saying that uh, Hannibal is king shit here, and so we go on and have in defense Hannibal going and stating that when you end up joining the Night Stalkers, they end up putting a tracker in your butt. And for any time that they're going to go on and be like, oh, yeah, right, you don't have a tracker. And they're like, well, where is the tracker? And he's like, well, yeah, it's in my left butt cheek. It's right beneath the Hello Kitty tattoo. And the more and more that he keeps making a joke about this, the more and more they start beating him up about it. But he's seemingly trying to be more and more honest about the whole tracker thing. So, but bizarrely, he states that the tracker is to have been dialed in from some satellite. And he also has to state it's up in space. Where else would a satellite be? So, moving on. So, consistently, like, he's stating because of this tracker that at some point he's going to have instant cavalry. And so, all of a sudden, the vampires are starting to cough. And he's like, oh, yeah, like, you know why you're coughing? You know why you're starting to feel ill? Because there is to be atomized colloidal silver that is being pumped through the air conditioning. And so people are starting to cough. Jarko is to be coughing out flames, it seems. And so he's like, okay, the fat lady should be singing right about. Any of you got a cell phone? Blade comes crashing through like Batman from Batman Forever. His entrance was good, but yours was better. Or no, wait. Like your entrance is good, but his was better. All right. So, and then like Abigail like makes her way in also after Blade, as Blade goes on and is to start to face off against the faceless goons and whatever. So as some of the actual vampires are just kind of backing away here, but Hannibal is, I think, off to just kind of face off against Jarko here, and we'll get to that. So so Abigail goes on and thrusts on her MP3s and starts breakdance fighting. So Blade starts dusting through all these vampires like it's nobody's business, and at one point he has that one weapon that he used in the first movie that he grabs and is like, huh, and he ends up using it to toss, and it hits a number of vampires all at once. Again, why does he need a team? It makes no freaking sense. So Abigail uses her UV arc behind her to dust one of the vampires that is behind her. So Hannibal goes on and is to bump into a number of mutated dogs. He's like, fuck me sideways, as all the dogs are to appear. There ends up being the Pomeranian, and then there's Rottweilers. So he ends up going on to run away from them, and then he grabs this one thing, this one kind of pipe or whatever, and all the dogs go flying out the window, and they all fall to supposedly their death. Who knows? It doesn't matter. You won't see them again. So after it seems that Hannibal's like, ha ha ha, like, I got to them, then he backs up, falls into this hole, goes back into facing off against Jarko, who's like, well, hey, do you know where my dogs are? He's like, have you tried the lobby? So Hannibal fights off with Jarko as Abigail goes and shoots out the lights, so it's much darker here. So here's where Blade finally faces off against Drake. Ready to die? Mother. And so Blade goes on like, motherfucker, I was born ready. And Drake is like, I like that, motherfucker. So I keep cussing here. I don't really care. This review has gone far too long than it probably justifiably should have been. So thank you for going on and listening to this if you're still here, because man, is this a stretch to hear. So say the word buffalo in the comments if you've lasted this long, and I'll probably completely forget ever that I had to have said that in a video. But it'll be funny to just hear the word buffalo and just be like, what? Why are you saying this? So, anyways, Blade goes on and faces off against Drake, and so sorry fight they go into, as also we have both Jarko and Hannibal going on and doing some arm bars, and eventually Hannibal figures out a way to break Jarko's arm, which does diddly worth of nothing. And why is it always in the third act of every single Blade movie? Somebody always has to break an arm. Because also the guy from the second movie, he like got his arm broken by Blade, and then the guy just it back, and then he just continues to just fight Blade as he punches him. What good does breaking an arm do? But it seems that people have to just consistently break arms in the third act. I don't know why it is. Because we have Paul Levesque is like, oh, you broke my arm, and then he's like, all right, let's keep fighting. So as he like thrusts him into the wall, and then like just pile drives him, or just does a huge slam or whatever. I can't think of what it is actually at this point of what he does. Uh, maybe like tombstone pile drives him. Maybe that's what it kind of is. So that's probably what it actually is. Because like Paul Levesque goes on and hugs Ryan Reynolds and like smashes him into the wall, and then he does the like tombstone pile driver. I think is what he actually does. So we have Asher that is watching on as Blade and Drake are fighting, and Abigail goes on and shoots an arrow to kill Asher, and then goes on and follows up by shooting a bunch of other vampires. So Drake, Blade fighting. Drake is consistently now probably getting very frustrated, consistently like, oh man, I just can't kill Blade. Huh. So Hannibal, Jarko are still fighting a million years later. Throughout this entire film, it feels like they've been fighting. Even though most of the time Hannibal and Abigail are fighting humans or who cares vampires. So Hannibal realizes that Jarko has those metal teeth, those grills. So Hannibal goes on and is to take uh, one of the bullets from that gun, and he jabs the bullet into uh, Jarko's mouth and like slams his mouth shut, and that ends up kind of dusting Jarko and has him fall backwards, and the body separates into little bitty pieces because of the little slivers of the weird way that this room is built, bizarrely. So, because of the weird slit thing that's going on there. So, but eventually Hannibal goes right into trying to face off against Talos. So, of course, they fight off. So, Blade, Drake fighting. Blade uh, ends up taking Drake through this glass, and he ends up going flying into the air, and you have to see his horrible CGI go through there as his face is starting to change. But then again, uh, we also have the two of them like fighting continues, and then they smash through this ground, and now Drake is like full on like in his monster mode, and so Drake ends up taking Blade and flinging him, and now he's like smashed into this one just kind of thing, like a steel column. I don't know. I've forgotten any kind of words that can justify what the heck is going on. So, uh, Abigail is going on and getting ready to shoot Daystar, and so as Blade and Drake are now like kind of closely together, and Drake is going to go and deliver the final blow because at some point neither one of them eventually have blades, because Draco drops his blade, Blade drops his sword. So Drake ends up going on to catch Abigail's arrow and doesn't think anything of it. And Blade ends up grabbing the arrow and chucking it into Drake to kill him. And that ends up having Drake fall backwards, and excuse me, and so all of a sudden that starts to have all the vampires to start get dusted, and we all of a sudden have like Talos that is choking Hannibal. It's like, give it up, Hannibal, give it up. And then all of a sudden she is giving it up because she's gonna die. And so Hannibal ends up going on to be like, oh, don't worry, kitten, I'll get help. And he walks off. So Drake ends up having Blade here with one final gift. All this time, people were trying to create a new kind of world of vampire when one already existed, which was Blade. I don't need to survive. The future of the race rests with you. Allow me a parting gift. But remember this, the thirst always wins. So, Drake dies, but I think he actually just weirdly disappears, I think, because I think he actually gets dusted, maybe? Abigail and Hannibal go on to rush to Blade's side, but then bizarrely they just leave him there, not knowing whether or not he's alive or not. So they just leave him for the FBI. The FBI goes on and swarms in, and they find Blade's body. They bring him to this hospital, and Blade ends up CGI-ing awake, and he ends up going on and starting to kill a lot of these doctors, and then he sees one woman there, and he may have killed her, maybe he didn't. So Blade is now on this motorcycle driving off into the moonlight because it's not the sunset. So we have Hannibal with this last thing of the virus didn't kill him because he was a hybrid. His heart never stopped beating. It simply slowed down. And so he slept, waiting for the moment he could walk the earth again. Because logically, what else does he have to go on and do but just kind of wait for more vampires to start cropping up? Because heaven forbid he fights anyone else. Also, like, there was maybe one good track in this entire soundtrack, but then everything else was just kind of really bad. So with that said, I'm going to get the heck out of here. Goodbye, everybody. Bye, everybody.